Hello and welcome to another great edition of Beyond the Hype. I know every time I say that it's going to be a great issue or a great edition or a great interview, but I deliver every time too. So stick with me. Listen, I have a fantastic guest, a fantastic topic because what we're talking about is not only groundbreaking in general, but groundbreaking in this particular industry. As you all know, there was a highly anticipated revival of the play Othello on Broadway right now. Probably the hottest ticket on Broadway for a revival of one of the most legendary theater productions in the history of theater. And the lead producer of that production, which is, of course, Othello, is here with us today. Brian Anthony Moreland. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Listen, Brian, as the Senior Vice President, Executive Editor of Black Enterprise, I get to host this show and I get to interview some amazing people. But I got to say, I've been anticipating this conversation so passionately since I found out that you were going to be available for the show.
Oh, wow.
Let me tell you why. My first professional is the wrong word, my first collegiate byline as a journalist in college, even though I'm known as a business financial journalist, obviously because of my years at Black Enterprise, was actually a review of a play called Slow Dance on the Killing Ground, which you may remember the original production of that was what launched the career of Clarence Williams the third. That wasn't the production I saw. I saw it at Crossroads Theater or at Rutgers University, the campus of the university I went through. But it was my first time writing a byline article about anything, and I was like so hit by. Ended up taking some theater courses under Glenda Dickerson and Avery Brooks, who was teaching at Rutgers at the time, and saw my first Broadway play. Now we're talking about back in 1981. It was a play called Innocent Black, starring Melba Moore. Didn't last long. She already got the Tony for Pearlie, I believe. But it was a big deal to me because I'd never seen a Broadway play before. So it's like since then, and I won't bore you with all the details. My oldest daughter was with the Classical Theater Harlem, and she did Shakespeare in the Park. And I took when my kids turned 8. I have 4 children. They got to see their first Broadway play, and they got to see Bring the Noise, Bring the Funk. So I've been on this journey
Oh,
around theater and the importance of theater and the impact of theater since I was a college student who'd had no exposure to Broadway uh, prior to that, and so I'm just fascinated by you're a Tony nominated producer. I mean, this Othello is breaking all kinds of records, and obviously the story of Othello is a very of the Shakespearean plays impactful. Again, I went to Rutgers, so Paul Robeson is Othello, and Avery Brooks is Othello. It just your story and your journey and your career just comes together for me in so many ways. With you being a guest on the show today, so again, I thank you for being on Beyond the Hype. But let's start with a little bit of your journey when you were, let's say, a kid. I don't know when did even the idea of Broadway or becoming a Broadway producer even become an inkling in your mind?
oh, wow. I never had the idea as a child that I want to be a producer. As a child, I was really enamored with theater. I did my first play in third grade. My third grade teacher called my mother and said, "Could Brian be in the school play?" My mother said yes. Then the teacher asked my mother, uh, "Well, will you make the costume?" And she said yes. And the play was uh, an elementary school review called "Be What You Want to Be," and I was Santa Claus. And I don't remember the performance itself. That doesn't live, that memory does not live in my mind. But the beginning, like going to start it, standing on the stage, and then ending on the stage, that memory I have. And I knew when I was done with that I wanted to be in theater. And through the course of theater now, I've performed on, off, national tours, cruise ships, all of that stuff, which then led me to having an opportunity to become a line producer on a project with Otis Salid and Debbie Allen. And I enjoyed it. Nothing, there was no secret to it. I just enjoyed it. And then I started slowly dipping my toe in as a co-producer and then moving up to a lead producer with my own projects. And so I think everyone finds their own path and their own journey to becoming a producer. For me, it was more of a progression, and I got very lucky that I love it. I love all the facets of theater.
Well, it may have been luck to begin with, but when you build a track record and you build up to what you're doing now, you know, it's what you do with that luck, the consistency, the learnings, the education, the application, and obviously theater's evolved so much over the years. Um, so let's bring to the present, to the obvious. I got to see Othello yesterday. I expected to be blown away, and I was. One because there's Broadway is Broadway, Shakespeare is Shakespeare, Othello is Othello, and all that means. And you put all that together, and you add Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal, and an amazing cast of people who understands the import of a revival of a production of this type. And then not only does it artistically, which is what I would imagine is what everybody wants, but it delivers as a piece of content at the box office. I mean, you're talking about setting all-time records. What does that mean for you as a lead producer and for everyone involved, but certainly for you as a lead producer, going from this third grade play to, especially this season, the only black lead producer this season. But it's so huge. I mean, every element of that: Shakespeare, Othello, Broadway, the actors involved, director Kenny Leon. All of those things together, any of those things individually would be big. What does it mean to be the lead producer of a production that has all those elements attached to it?
It means very little sleep, and I'm gonna come out with a lot of gray hairs. Um, it's very exciting. I say to my team that we're just here to create an environment that these talents can thrive. That's it. That's it. And so I just don't want to be the person that messes it up so that people like Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal and Kenny Leon don't come back to Broadway. Like I don't want to be the reason that they don't come back. So that keeps me up at night. But other than that, it feels incredibly lucky, and I feel very, very, very honored. I mean, these artists in this type of moment don't happen. They're both singular in their constellation, and yet when you put them together, it's like it's lightning in a bottle. And it's just I'm reticent to say, but I will say I don't think we will ever have a pairing like this again in a lifetime. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity and moment on the stage.
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I mean that's one of the things that was I was impressed by. Okay, there's all the things that I heard. My best friend, Jimmy Lee Tillman, who's the global director of the Harold Washington Cultural Center in Chicago, but who brings actors to the Tonys every year, and I've been her guest to the Tonys a couple of times, and she got to see an earlier version of the production. I guess it's producer, something I couldn't go see, but she's like I get to go see it. But anyway, um, and she talked about the challenge of making the whole greater than the sum of the parts, and how from production standpoint, you think it's just you put two great actors on the stage together and magic happens, but that doesn't always happen because it's how they work together that creates a better product than the two obviously A-list legendary iconic actors and artists. It's a thing. I liken it to putting two stars from two different in the NBA on the same team, and then they can't play well together. Like they're great, but they're
Mhm.
horrible together. You don't get the
Mhm.
benefit of them being on the floor together, and it takes, I'm sure, the rest of the cast. It takes the mindset of the two stars. It takes obviously great direction. There's so many moving parts. And as I say to people about live theater, that's performing without a net. That's not television. That's not film. It's everybody on that stage is performing without a net. And they're doing it night after night after night after night with all kinds of. So talk to me about what it means to be able to bring together two stars like that, um, who as much as they are and I've seen interviews with both of them about what it means the craft of acting. Stars first, they're not celebrities first. They care about the craft of acting, which you have to care about if you're going to do theater. You don't have to care about that to do
Oh, they're
movies.
thespians.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
oh,
good
oh,
for
they're
real.
thespians.
Yeah. So what does it
Oh,
mean?
yes, they are
The
thespians.
like you said, there's a great kind of opportunity, but responsibility to allow them to do what they do in a way that enhances and brightens the stars for both of them and everybody on those stages.
It's complicated and it's layered. I
Mm.
spend a lot of time discussing with our director Kenny Leon about the process, and he calls rehearsal discovery. It's not there to rehearse the play, it's there to discover the play. We're there to discover this world, to build this world. And I really sit in awe of him because he is the one that is the magic key. He is the one that is the linguist on the production. I say that to say every one of those elements you just mentioned, when you're talking about Denzel Washington and you're talking about Jake Gyllenhaal, and then you're balancing that with Tony Award winner Andrew Burnap, and then you're balancing it with the newcomer of Molly Osborne coming over from England, and so you're balancing all of those people, and they all have a different language. They all have a different way of receiving the vision to create the world that they're all going to breathe in. And so it really boils down to the director, who's the linguist of all of them, the master linguist who speaks to all of them to hold them in that space so they can breathe the same air to create the world of Othello.
And the other thing about live theater, and and again, I do a lot of analogies both with media, regular media, magazines. I'll just say, which we don't really do magazines in the traditional sense anymore, and sports. And it's always like when you make a great movie, once you're finished, it is great forever. When you do live theater, no matter how well it was done the first night, you still got to do it again. What happened yesterday, great, but and
Hmm.
again, so it's without a net, and you have to repeat that excellence over and over and over again without a net. Now, there's some argument.
And that's why I call them thespians.
Yes,
And they're fans of the stage, because when you make a film, you have the opportunity to cut. You
yes,
cut and you can retake and retake and retake, and then the editor can go inside and splice a couple of scenes together, so all of a sudden it creates the moment that you really want to see as the audience. But as an audience member, when you're visiting theater and it's live, it is performing without a net, because there is no cut, there is no take, there is no let me do that over. It is what it is in that moment,
yes.
and then it's gone.
And to me, that's the thing that keeps theater. That's what makes theater theater compared to everything else. And
Mhm.
I want to not go too deep on the tangent. But I've interviewed other people both in television and film for this show, and I talk about how when all is said and done, in part, because let's talk about artificial intelligence and its impact on being able to make content. And I'm a Marvel MCU person, and when they created the Hulk and CGI and all that stuff, I was like, they literally created the Hulk. Yeah, they use the actor's face, but I said in theater, you got to speak your own lines.
You get none of that.
You get none of that. It's real. You
None of
can
that.
do it or you can't. And so again,
That's
I'm
right.
fascinated by theater because of that, and it's why I still think, like most people do, think of theater as the kind of the I don't want to say it's the hardest. Every platform has its strengths and weaknesses, but it's the one where either you can do it or you can't do it. It really really is.
You know, I a couple of seasons ago I produced August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, and it
Yes,
starred
I
Samuel L.
saw that
Jackson
production.
and John David Washington.
I saw that production.
And
Wonderful.
Samuel, oh, thank you, thank you. And Sam always says, if you can't get on the stage, you can't really call yourself an actor. And he talks about going to Hollywood the first time and thought every talking about this theater thing, and he was always saying, uh, "What do you mean you haven't done theater? You can't. You're to be in front of the camera, but you haven't done the stage. That's where the work happens. The work happens on the stage to perfect uh, becoming an effective storyteller. That's where it happens."
I
Hmm.
agree. I
Hmm.
agree wholeheartedly. I'm so biased in your favor. I'm so not as much of a country. Uh, talk to me about, and with all of our guests, and we had everybody from, you know, heart surgeons to corporate executives, whatever. Give me a glimpse of what your world looks like. What does it look like inside your own mind, inside your own body, when you're moving around as a lead producer? And I'm sure no 2 days are exactly alike, but what does that mean when people hear a lead producer? What do you do? How do you affect the people in the system around you? How does that affect you and just your decisions about how you maneuver through the day? If somebody's now finished their third grade play and they show this, saw this interview because their mama made them watch it or whatever, and they say, "Oh, I think I might want to be a lead producer." What are they actually asking for that you wouldn't have known to ask for when you first got bitten by this bug?
What do they ask for? They ask for mentorship.
Mm,
That's the thing to ask for. Mentorship. Someone to give you access to the world of producing, because lead producing is an ever evolving, ever encompassing position. But if it's somebody who is seeking to be a producer, then they should find someone who's willing to give them access, because it's a type of job that you really only learn by doing. And so that's why people come to it from a multitude of ways, whether it's a second career, a third career, a fourth career change. They find themselves becoming producers. For me, the lead producer is the one who is financially responsible for the production.
mm.
So I sign my name with the SEC, and they are the one. I am the one that goes out and I raise the capital. So the capital for the productions, I am responsible for that. I have a fiduciary responsibility to get my investors their money back, and if there's an opportunity to create some profit for them as well. But like any regular investment, it's always a gamble. You know, one out of every five Broadway shows actually recoup. And so uh, my job is to blend commerce with art. And hopefully the two can balance out so that people can still invest in Broadway and have Broadway be something that's really profitable and they can be proud of it, and also still present great art.
That's
So
real,
I
that's real,
do.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to
Mm,
cut you off because I want to make stick opinion on that idea. It's so important that the audience understands the tremendous financial the responsibility of managing Broadway productions. I remember when Broadway was literally in crisis, um, not because the art wasn't good, but because this idea of how do you, like you said, up the proportion of productions that actually at least break even, if not make money. I mean, it was really a crisis because there was a period, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking from the outside looking in, when there wasn't as much focus on the fiduciary management of productions as the cost of production rose and rose and rose and rose. Many of the theater houses are relatively small compared to other mediums, so you got to be able to make every ticket count, if you will. And I think it got to a point, maybe in my recollection, maybe 20 years ago, I could be off, when people really started to say, wait, how these things are produced actually matters if we want Broadway to survive. And so I really do want you to kind of delve into this idea that this is not just, when we think of our first exposure to theater, usually in school, we just think, oh, we need some costumes, mama makes some costumes, and we need to create some sets, let's do some paper mache, and we don't think of that. But when you see the productions, and again, my friend Jamalita at her theater, they do a lot of stuff getting youth involved in everything from lighting to stage design, and then you realize what a huge thing it is, and how easy it is to spend a lot of money. And like you said, a show could open and close in weeks. Um, so,
on.
so how were you prepared for that? The fiduciary part, and like you said, I don't know how much of it's intentional, how much of it was you just getting experience along the way. But I don't think that people always understand what it really means to produce beyond the artistic side of production.
Great, great, great topic. So my mother's an accountant, and so I've always been looking at money and numbers, and I'm an excellent saver. And so I've always been good, and my mind does well with that. And so I always think about my good general manager. Your general manager is like your CFO of your company. And with your general manager, you create this budget and you have to think about uh, most of the times you're creating a budget and you may not necessarily know the size of your house yet. And so you're trying to create this in a vacuum. So you estimate every single number and then you put it into what your weekly cost is going to be and then you go out and you raise the capital. For Broadway, the capital you raise is only money that gets you to the first public paid performance.
Wow.
Right after that first public paid performance, you are dependent upon the ticket sales of the public. That's it. So if the public stops coming, your show's not going to do well. You have to really pay attention to both sides of it.
Well, again, speaking as someone who's a fan of theater, I don't think it hit me that clearly that, we think once the show opens and it's a hit, it just, there's money behind it. But this idea, no, once the show is up, it's got to feed itself. It's got to feed itself, if it's going to continue to go forward. And so when
That's a much more succinct way of saying it. It has to feed itself.
mm,
Correct.
mm. And so when we all hear about the shows that run seemingly forever and ever and ever and ever, but we don't always think of, like I said, the Innocent Blacks. I went to see Innocent Black as my first play because I knew Melba Moore from Pearlie, but I didn't get to see Pearlie. I didn't know anything as a 19-year-old college student.
Hmm.
But of course, we're thinking, oh my God, this is going to be great. And of course, Ms. Moore was absolutely excellent because she's an amazing talent. But we covered, you can have the great talent on stage, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a financially successful production. Um,
That's absolutely correct. That is
mm,
so well said and so perfectly phrased. You never know. When I'm doing Othello now, as you said, and I'm so happy you saw the play. Um, this particular show, people, it's easy to say, oh, it's Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal. Yes, but they still require a director. It's also Kenny Leon, and the gamble is that it's Shakespeare. And so there's no question you want to see those two great acting talents on stage, directed by a Tony Award winning director, Kenny Leon, but also the notion that the barrier to entry could be Shakespeare. So it's not necessarily a slam dunk. And so it's always a gamble, is the point. So you were absolutely well said.
Yeah, I want to get into that idea that the barrier to entry is Shakespeare. Um, like I said, I've seen, again, if you went to Rutgers, you know about Paul Robeson. And if you know about Paul Robeson, then you've seen at least the clips of him playing Othello, because that's just
Oh,
an
yeah.
iconic performance. And of course, when I was at Rutgers, Avery Brooks was teaching at Rutgers and was doing he would do Paul Robeson himself. And so, again, my appreciation for Othello wasn't because of Othello. It was because of Paul Robeson and Avery Brooks, because as a 19, 21-year-old, Shakespeare was the these and the thous and the thuses and the where, it was, it was, and it wasn't until later, as I became more deeply appreciative of Shakespeare, not just Othello, but other Shakespeare productions. My palate for Shakespeare had to mature to get to the point where it's like, oh my God, yeah, that's such a powerful story. And but I will say this, and I really want your insights on how you guys approach this particular revival. And I don't want to give away too much because I want people to see it for themselves. It's still legit, like I don't want to make it sound Shakespeare. I mean, dialogue, but the setting obviously is a different setting than the classical Shakespeare production.
Hmm.
And it does get into some of the common themes of Othello, including his own insecurities that ultimately led to his really betraying himself by his own insecurities and downfall. Talk to me about the approach that you and the actors and the director took to this particular revival that, if I'm maybe so bold, does make it accessible to people who would think maybe I'm not really into the Shakespeare thing. I'm not really into Othello. When you see how this is presented, even if it took you a
Hmm.
while to adjust to the language of the play, the visuals of the play very much make it accessible. And again, I'm trying not to give too much away, or at least no more away than you want to give away. Let me put it that way.
No, no, you're fine. I love that you spoke about the visuals because I think about Shakespeare like an opera,
Mm,
meaning most of the time you go to the opera, it's not a language that you probably speak, and that's okay. But their portrayal as they are singing to one another, that's where we get the story. That's where we understand what's being said because the visuals of the storytelling is so strong. That was a point of concern and a huge focus for this version of Othello. Most of the time, if you go and watch Othello, usually in the Shakespeare Company, it's going to be 3 hours and 40 minutes.
yes.
It's a long play. This particular version is 2 hours and 30 minutes. So it is what we call abridged. However, they are the normal words as written by William Shakespeare. And so this particular version is set in the not so distant future. We say not so distant because we want to get out of the now. There are so many themes within Othello: love, destruction, betrayal, an abuse of power, um, racism. These are all things that we could tie to our current political system, and that's not really the story has so much more to offer than staying on our current time. So if you take that time period and move it forward, then you get a chance to just exist with this story and exist with, wow, even then we are discriminating against this man and testing this man's ability to love, his ability to trust. Um, Othello is on a spiritual journey between the good and the bad. And so all of that comes into play in the not so distant future. And we can experience it fresh and new, um, and makes it very, very accessible to our ears and to our eyes because it's very familiar to what our culture looks like today.
And I appreciate that, and I'm going to say how I received it for reasons that have probably nothing to do with anything but my own lens as a
Mm,
theater goer at this stage of my life. What struck me, you talked about racism because obviously Othello is a black Moor who in a society that just like now and the future is not always a well received thing. Um, but what struck me in terms of Othello's vulnerability in this wasn't just his race, but his age. This idea that he was this lion that had married this obviously younger, obviously beautiful, obviously someone desired and inaccessible to other younger men, younger suitors. That even
mhm,
her father was like, "Why this guy?" And though he was obviously a decorated general and a decorated warrior and a man of esteem and respect at the same time, despite all of that, part of his vulnerability was I'm an old dude, and sooner or later, this young woman is going to want somebody else. Even though Desdemona never, ever indicated that in any way. And even
mhm.
when
She's faithful.
was faithful, and even as she was saying he was still willing to believe. This is my own interpretation, guys. So see it for yourself. The voices in his own head, and of course the voices that were placed there by Iago. I don't think it's giving too much away to know for people that wouldn't
No, you're not
know.
giving too much away at
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
You have to say
Yeah,
it that way.
that voice was still more important to him than the voice of truth, in part because of his own insecurities as an older man perceived to be having a
Mhm,
woman that he shouldn't be able to compete for, much less be able to hold on to. It was too easy for him to believe. And for
mhm,
me, I just turned 65, and that's why I thought Denzel Washington was so great in this role because as an actor, he is someone at the peak of his powers, but yet, I mean, he's not the Denzel Washington we saw in Glory anymore. So to me, he was able to authentically play this role in a way that meant something to me, not again as a black man, because obviously he brings that to the table, but as a man at the peak of his powers, but obviously on the back end of his life and career, not on the front end. And
mhm.
obviously there's a whole crop of young black young actors. Well, again, the contrast against Gyllenhaal as the young lion undermining. I just thought it was just very powerful on so many levels, and that could have been just me because of where I'm in my life. But I don't know if I would appreciated that when I first saw Othello 30 years ago. You know,
I love that you said that. I talk about this play in such it's such an exploration of love. It is Desdemona who loves Othello,
yes,
pure and true and faithful, and he loves her, true and faithful and pure. And then there's the love that Iago has, and there's the love that Othello has for his friend Iago, and that love then becomes abused and it's corrupted when Iago becomes jealous and and vengeful, and he abuses that love
yes,
to Othello, which causes that destruction with the wife. So I really think about the play and it speaks so much about love and what happens when love is abused.
yes, and how, in my opinion, how love isn't always contagious, but jealousy and corruption is very contagious.
Oh
Very,
yes.
very contagious.
Oh yes.
Uh,
Oh yes.
um, Especially if someone's intentionally spreading it, which is a reality of life.
There's a great line in the play where Othello says to Iago, "I will have ocular proof." And then Iago sets out to create that proof.
Yes, yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes. Oh my God! Now I got to go see it again. Okay, and bring somebody with me. Check this out. And I saved this question because I want it to be delicious for you. Hopefully, what was it like to get your? And you've been Tony nominated twice. What was it like to get your first Tony nomination?
I cried. I
Mm,
cried, and my mother jumped up and down, and we were just overjoyed to be nominated. Really and truly, like that was it. I was overjoyed to be nominated. I never thought in my wildest dreams that this would be my life. This is not what I envisioned for my life, and to have it, it's a huge blessing. Um, but it's weird. It's weird. Hmm.
tell me about the weird part.
I just mean it's well, when you ask a question like, you know, what did you do today? And I was with one of my fellows, and I said, today we are sitting in the theater, and we're going to be available for any small fires. Well, what does that mean? A dressing room needs to be repaired. Uh, a light bulb actually needs to be ordered that hasn't been authorized, so you need to go and find out why that hasn't happened. Uh, Furniture has not come in that needs to come in, so you need to go out and source the furniture yourself so you can get it done, because everyone's working at maximum speed at the top of their craft on a little postage size stage, and everyone has to work together, and we can only use the stage at certain times, and so you're just there to be available. Sometimes you're going to do a coffee run, sometimes you're just saying hi and hello, and this is all outside of, have you checked the marketing plan and what are the sales today? Like, this is just your base openness to be available and be around. And I always call it keeping your pom poms out for your team, so you can keep them happy and light and okay and cared for.
You know,
Hmm.
that's something that I've only really begun to appreciate over the last several years. Again, I've mentioned my friend Juanita Tillman and watching her productions, and it didn't hit me until the last several years that we think of theater as what happens on the stage from the time the curtain goes up and the curtain goes down.
Hmm.
And we don't, at least well, I do now, have an appreciation for all the things that have to happen, really, if you're lucky, um, 15 hours a day, more likely 20 hours a day. Like you said, when are you going to sleep? Because there's a whole bunch of moving parts, people, places, things, resources that have to be in the right place at the right time for that, in the case of Othello, 2.5 hours that this magic is going to happen. And then it's going to be somewhat
That's right.
dismantled and have to be done again and again. And of course, life is happening around you. Actors have lives. You have a life. People have histories
Hmm.
and life is happening, and that changes the variables for every performance. But you still got to bring it back together over and over again. And I tell people that you think of theater as what happens for the 3 hours you're in the theater. Maybe 5 hours if you're talking about, will call is open, let's get everybody in and get everybody out. But it's so much
Hmm.
more than that. And I guess as lead producer, you have to be on top of all of that.
You are on top of all of that. Broadway is comprised of 41 buildings.
Mm.
41 individual buildings comprise or make up Broadway, what we know it. But these are 41 individual startups.
Yes.
So every time a show opens, it's a brand new company, it's a brand new startup.
Mm.
So that means you got to start all the way from the beginning and go again.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yes. You just
Oh
blew
yeah.
my mind because I'm thinking every night. No, you're right. No, every show,
Every show.
every year.
Hmm. Or every 2 months, which however long the show runs, when the
Yes.
next one comes in, that's a brand new startup as well.
Wow. No, I'm thinking because this is, you don't even know all that about me, but my degree is in art. So people are,
Hmm.
no one's more surprised than me that I ended up becoming a business journalist. But I laugh when everybody talk about, oh, creative people aren't business people. And I'm like, come on now. You don't understand creative people if you think creatives are business people because of all that it takes. And just everything you just said about what it means to be a lead producer shows you how you really can't be a successful creative no matter where you are in the process. If you're not a business person, if you're not a finance person, if you're not, like you said, it's not just
Hmm.
one startup. You got to have a successful startup over and over and over and over and over again, and it gives me a new appreciation for when plays and productions not only run a long time, but then they go on tour and or they may be birthed off Broadway or off Broadway, and then make it to, and you realize that means
That's right.
success has to happen over and over and over again, which means creatives have to be financially sound, business sound, time management sound over and over and over again. That often so-called business professionals may only have to do it once right, and we're good. I mean,
Correct.
I
Correct.
really want to get a deep appreciation for people about both the professional, financial, and entrepreneurial chops that it takes to do what you and your peers do. Listen, let's talk.
Thank
Let's
you.
talk in the time we have left about the future. Well, first of all, how long is Othello running, so my audience knows?
So your audience knows we run Othello is running on Broadway at the Barrymore
Mhm.
Theater until June 8th.
June 8th.
Tickets are available online. Grab them.
Yeah, and let me repeat: grab them. This is a legitimately hot ticket, but it's
Hmm.
worth every minute. I measure wealth in time, not in money. It's worth every
Oh,
minute
thank you.
that you will spend to secure your seat, sit in that seat, and experience that experience. So absolutely. And I know you right now. You're in the middle of what you're doing, and most successful people I know, when I ask them what's next, they think what's next is what I got to do right in front of me. But you're obviously you're not done with your career. There's other things you're looking to accomplish. What is Brian Moreland looking to do beyond the successful run of Othello? What do we have to look forward
I
to from you?
I have some more plays, and some more musicals that I want to accomplish.
Mhm.
It's a very small list, but they are there and they are in the works, and
Mhm.
they'll get announced very shortly.
Yep.
But I also want to do movies. I want to do movies. I love the medium, and I also want to do some TV shows. So I'm branching out, expanding the portfolio, as you say, and finding different avenues for some of the stories that I already have that can be told in a different medium. So it's good. It's good right now.
So you make a great point. As much as I'm all in with why live theater is number one in my book, and it it is for a lot of reasons for me. Not every story lends itself to this platform of storytelling. There are some things
That's right.
that are better for television. There are some things that are better for movies, and there's even some versions of. I remember I saw The Taming of the Shrew. Now this goes way back, and I know I'm much older than you are, so I always pull myself
Ooh,
back. That was on PBS, and it was my first time watching a Shakespeare play on TV. I think Mark Hamill was
wow.
in it, if I remember it correctly. Um, And it was a Taming of the Shrew is not one of my favorite uh, productions. It's just not. But when I saw that on TV, I was like, actually, this works for me. I don't know why this works for me. So even Shakespeare, depending on, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts and variables to what makes a Shakespeare play hit
Hmm.
or not hit with a given audience. But I do appreciate this idea that you got your chops in theater. That's the bug that bit you. But ultimately, you're in the business of storytelling, and I emphasize the business part
Hmm.
and the storytelling part. And there's a reason why we've evolved so many different platforms of storytelling. So I appreciate this idea that you want to be able to see what you could do on all these other platforms. I can't wait for you to announce
Thank you.
something.
Thank you. I will. I will very soon.
And I usually end all of my interviews with, well, two things. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? I don't know your socials, your particular website, follow your career.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of different ways. BeMoreNowProductions.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, and that will keep you in touch. You can also follow me on Instagram at the real Brian Moreland. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent, 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 excellent. And my
Mhm.
last question, unless you have something else you want to leave the audience with, is one of my regular questions. I won't say I ask every guest, but for someone like you who is in the business of other people's business, as Earl Grey's, our late founder, used to say, and who has to look out for so many other things. How does Brian Moreland look out for Brian Moreland? What do you do to replenish after you
Oh,
poured yourself
thank
out
you.
in the life in your work in life?
Thank you so much for that question. I have a really supportive family, and I unplug frequently. Yep, that's how I go and care for Brian. Yep, I literally go away with my family and I unplug for 2 or 3 days and literally just unplug. And I plan them out so that I can actually recharge.
Oh, see,
Hmm.
and the reason I asked that question because when obviously at Black Enterprise and even for this show, we interview a lot of people who are high performers, a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, a lot of success, and I'm always expressing to people the importance of rest and restoration, not as a if you can get around to it, but I said people don't achieve these levels of success over time because excellence is success over time. If there's not
You're so
a
right.
restoration and recharge element that is planned and scheduled, not when I get around to it. And I
Correct.
could bore you with a whole another soapbox that I stand on a regular basis about the health and longevity of Black people and Black men in particular, because we have a tendency, for a lot of reasons, culturally legitimate reasons, to work ourselves to death as a definition of success, as opposed to working and delivering excellence over time so that we may thrive over time. And rest
Ooh,
that's planned and scheduled and intentional is so important. So I'm just glad that you reinforced that. I didn't pay him to say that. He came with that on his own. Listen, Brian, is there anything else you want to leave the Beyond the Hype audience with? You've been so generous with
I
your
just want to
time.
say thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. And come and see Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal in Othello at the Barrymore Theater.
You will not regret it. And bring somebody with you. Bring some young people with you in particular. This is, to me, a great way to introduce younger people to Shakespeare um, in a way that's very exciting and accessible. That's my 2 cents. Listen, Brian, thank you so much for being my guest on Beyond the Hype. Yep, I promised and I delivered. You've just heard another great edition of Beyond the Hype. You can catch this episode at blackenterprise.com on demand. You can find us on YouTube along with other Black Enterprise series such as The New Norm with Selena Hill and Sisters Inc. with Elisa Gums, and there's a whole menu of great content. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. Take care of yourself, and we will see you next time.